Mental Health Mondays. And once again, I'm joined by my great friend, a small business owner at Pathways to Healing here in Noblesville, also the spouse of a Noblesville City Councilor, Kristen Boyce. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen, for having me. Excited to
Well,
be here again today.
thank you again for joining me. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about mental health today. We're going to check in with folks. If you're a first-time listener, we'll do some reviewing about some great tips for you to control your mental health during this time. Just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions during today's broadcast, feel free to type them in. We'll be happy to answer them as we go. This will be saved on the city's Facebook page, so you can go back and review it. But again, we're here to have an open, honest dialogue about our mental health during really, really very trying times. So let's get started with that. And Kristen, I know what you're going to have us do. It's something that I've been practicing all weekend. I did it this morning as I got ready to head into the office to start a new Monday. So why don't you take it from here and teach us your number one technique to calm ourselves?
So number one technique is through the breath. So you can do this anytime, any place, whether you're getting stressed with the kids, you're overwhelmed with work, and you just feel like life is just hitting you and you're extremely overwhelmed. This is the number one strategy to get calm. So we call it square breathing. We inhale for 4, we hold for 4, we exhale through our mouth. So we're going to inhale through our nose, we're going to exhale out our mouth. We really want the full benefit of the breath on that exhale. So we're going to drop the shoulders down. And this I recommend doing every single hour. So let's do it together. So we're going to practice just kind of self-regulation and getting calm, feeling your feet on the floor. That's the first step. And again, you can do this anywhere, anytime, even if you're standing up. We're going to take a deep breath through our nose. Release out your mouth like you're cooling soup.
So we're not cooling the cookie today. We're cooling soup.
Cooling soup today.
All right. I got it.
Kind of day. So
I got it.
Inhale through our nose. Exhale out the mouth. You'll notice I really drop my shoulders on that out breath to get that full benefit of that exhale. So you'll notice the difference before and after you do the breathing. And the more you do it, the more self-regulated you're going to become and the calmer you're going to be. So this is great for anxiety, depression, stress, fear, and anger. I highly recommend this is your first step to being able to cope with the feelings and the feelings of overwhelm.
Well, and it's one of the things that you usually say is that sometimes you even feel a little lightheaded. I know this morning when I did it, it was a little lightheaded feeling, but it was a very calm feeling that I felt when I did it. And so I encourage anyone, even in the midst of chaos, take a moment, stand in your bedroom or wherever you're at, take that deep breath. It really helped me focus and get centered as I headed out the door this morning. So that's a great piece of advice. And I see a lot of our friends are already chiming in and saying hi to us. Feel free to say hi on the Facebook page. We love to know who's watching. Maggie, Patrick, Janie, my buddy Janie from Orange Theory, who I miss going and working out with, which is one of my stress reducers here. So great to have her join with us as well. So Kristen, I've been actually watching a lot of news, which is one of the things that you would give advice on, kind of limiting that exposure. But one of the things I have noticed lately is a lot of our leaders across the country are talking about mental health during this time. So I thought I would just pose the question from the start here before we kind of get into some of those tips for mental health. Why is mental health so important? Kind of talk about the very maybe 50,000 foot view as to why we're even talking about mental health right now.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation to start because mental health affects every single human on the planet. We all have different ways that we are impacted through our environment and through what's going on in the world. So mental health helps us be able to cope and tolerate with what's going on. So we're seeing an increased level of depression and anxiety. And we want to talk about collective trauma. And people go, well, what is trauma? Trauma can be defined in a numerous amount of ways, and it really lives in the body. So if we're holding in our emotions, the stress, and it lives in our body, what we see is the body and the immune system are impacted. So we see isolation right now can impact the immune system if we're not getting some vitamin C, if we're not getting human contact, if we're not moving at all. We are seeing an increased correlation with depression and anxiety. So it's an important conversation to have. And also those frontline workers, the first responders, the healthcare workers that are on the front lines, they are also experiencing what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, watching people pass away or die without their loved ones near. It has a huge, tremendous impact on how they feel day to day, their motivation level, their sleep habits, their eating habits. It's an important conversation because not one single person is not impacted by what's going on. Everybody's impacted. And if we don't check in and talk about how to cope with this, we're not going to be able to move through it and mitigate and handle and reduce depression and anxiety. So we need to teach people on how do we cope with this. And we started off with the breath. And is that a cure-all? No, that's a start. That's a start to be able to process and handle and move through what's going on. So it's an important part so we can start talking about it and processing it.
I think one of the common misconceptions that you just alluded to is that mental health is really separate from physical health. And what I hear you saying is actually they go hand in glove.
They are hand in hand. So how we feel emotionally, mentally affects us physically. And we will see a decrease in our immune system. We'll see as a response, trauma lives in the body. So we'll see autoimmune issues. We can see a correlation to increased illness. So if we're not feeling tended to mentally and we're not handling that, it does live in the body. And what we're trying to do is release all of that that's held in the body and move it up and out so we can feel centered, we can ground, we can tolerate and handle what's going on stress-wise, because stress management is critical to mental health.
Well, let's talk on this stress level here a little bit. We're going into week 87, who knows, of e-learning in front of us. So let's talk a little bit about tips for parents that are getting ready to go conquer e-learning starting tomorrow, for grandparents who I know have stepped up to the plate in major ways right now, for maybe that aunt or uncle who are stepping in, whoever it may be, who's stepping in to guide this e-learning process. Let's talk about our top tips for them to communicate with their kids during this very difficult time.
So the first tip is breathe. We already know that's going to be my first tip. Second tip is go over the schedule. Everybody needs to know what the schedule looks like. What are the Zoom calls? What are the assignments due? Especially for the little ones. The teenagers are a little bit more self-sufficient. But if in creating a space, I know I've talked about that before, but we need a designated space for the e-learning to happen, especially when you have multiple kids. They each need their own space. 3 is having realistic expectations. That's the one thing. We get into a lot of comparison and we're like, well, they look like they're doing it so easy and they've got the calendar posted on Facebook and I feel like I'm a terrible parent. So I'm seeing across the board a ton of shame right now. And shame says, I'm not good enough. I'm a bad parent. I'm not enough. I could be doing it better. And so what I'm seeing right now is we get into that comparison and then we get into shame and then we get into unrealistic expectations. So the first thing I say is take that deep breath and do the best you can, because at this point, it's hard. It's hard on 2 working parents or single moms and those teachers that have kids at home. This is a hard time. So let's not be harder on ourselves than needs to be. Be flexible. So that's my other number 4 is flexibility. You're going to have to be flexible. So if, Susie's hungry and it's supposed to be reading time, you're good to take a deep breath and know you can pivot the schedule. Let's get the snack in before we can learn. Otherwise, they're not going to learn well. So self-regulation for parents is key. And this is super hard right now because we feel like we're overwhelmed with our own work, perhaps the chores at home, getting everything done and taking care of the kids 24/7 and the e-learning. So let's have some self-compassion for ourselves. Let's have a lot of grace for ourselves and take our deep breaths and tell yourself, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can.
That's awesome. I just saw somebody, Melinda, post on there. We had a schedule posted from the wall and it lasted a half an hour and it was breakfast. Glad you said be
Exactly.
flexible. I think every parent can relate to that. We've had the same nightly dinner schedule on our refrigerator for about 6 months now, and I haven't had that meal in at least 6 months. So, yeah, be flexible. Everyone's best laid plans are just that, a plan, but be willing to change that plan and be ready to pivot a little bit. So,
And it's
and grace,
okay. And it's okay to do that.
yeah, and grace is a good way, a good comment too. I actually said to our staff not too long ago that we need to be focused on giving some more grace right now, just to a lot of people around us, because it's a really tough time, and know that people are making comments that maybe they don't mean, and that certainly applies to the household as well.
For sure, because we can
Yeah,
get really reactive. And so that's why my number one thing is take that breath first before you have anything come out of your mouth,
yeah.
which is really hard to do when you
Yeah.
feel stressed and overwhelmed.
Yes, yes. Or if you type it on Facebook, take that breath first before you go type it. So, let's talk a little bit about in the heat of the moment. So we have kids, and you always use the flipping the lid. You do it better than I do. In the moment, you're trying to work with a kid on e-learning. They are just doing the shake. The tears are coming. The overwhelmed sense. They're going to throw their pencil at you. In that moment, what as parents can we do to step in to calm that situation?
Yeah, first of all, it's really hard because it
Mhm.
happens more than one time a day. It's like multiple times a day because they don't want to do it or they're feeling frustrated because they don't understand it. So first of all, breathe because I don't move forward in this. I'm not perfect at this, but I try to take the deep breath and they're so dysregulated. They're seeing red. So at this point, to try to have a rational conversation isn't going to be wise. The first thing you want to do is regulate yourself so you can get to calm. And then we have what's called mirror neurons, which hopefully, I'm trying to get into the screen here, you can then help them calm. And then I'm going to be doing a lot of acknowledgement. I know this is frustrating. I know you don't want to do this right now. I know this isn't fun for anybody. I get it. I get that. Let's take a deep breath. And they're not going to want to do this with you, by the way. I'm trying to regulate myself. Acknowledgement is huge right now because there's a lot of frustrations for kids. Technology, they can't see if it's not working, especially, they don't want to do it. They'd rather do video games, let's be honest, or watch their shows or play games or anything but e-learning. You have some kids that love it. And so they're doing okay. We're talking about the kids that are really struggling. It's hard to learn on a screen. So we have to have realistic expectations, and I highly recommend breaks. I'm a big break person. Your brain, they're called brain breaks. Your brain needs a break. You need a break. They need a break. I'm very strong into recommending breaks. So we can reset, we can regroup, we can get that snack, we can maybe do a few minutes of something else or a half an hour of something else and eat something. Let's see, are they tired? Are they hungry? If they are tired or hungry, you're going to need to mitigate that first before you continue with e-learning. They're not going to learn and they're going to continue to throw fits and tantrums.
Yeah, that's key. I appreciate that. So let's pivot a little bit. We've talked a lot about e-learning the last couple of weeks, parenting. I want to hone in on a different group, and that's couples. I am in a imperfect marriage, as I'm sure anyone is. That we are constantly, Julie Jensen and I are very open. That we work through issues all the time. We argue just like every other couple. She has her ways of passively aggressively taking me on, and I have my ways, and all that good stuff. This is a really trying time. Marriage is hard in general, with every perfect thing going on. So now you're putting us all in a house. You have us dealing with our kids, which is very, very tricky. And now you have us as a couple trying to work together and keep a strong marriage intact. So let's talk a little bit about that group of people and great advice for couples during this time, that can be very trying on a relationship.
Yeah, what I'm seeing right now with couples is one, when you have two working couples and you're trying to manage the e-learning and take care of the kids in general, meals, who told we have to have 3 meals a day, and then they want snacks and they're still hungry. And there's a lot of who's going to take care of the kids during what time. So and then if you're home, like what I'm finding right now is communication is a real breakdown because we are having a lot of shame, and with shame comes storytelling. So for example, if one parent is focusing on, let's say they have 3 meetings and they're in a 3-hour meeting and the other person is taking care of the kids, what happens is there's a lot of resentment because the person that's taking care of the kids feels exhausted, feels tired, feels overwhelmed. And so we can start making up stories like we're doing everything and they don't care. And maybe that's true. But what we need to first do is communicate. And what I've been recommending to a lot of couples is writing out what you feel first. And I normally, that would be maybe a secondary recommendation, but now I'm finding the kids are around 24/7. And sometimes you can't have those conversations immediately. So a quick 5 minute, you can write it in your phone. You can send it, don't send it yet. You can write a text message. You can write an email. And I start with acknowledgement. So I know we're both overwhelmed. I know you're doing the best you can, and you really are stressed as well. I know we're both stressed and trying to take care of the kids, and I know your intentions are good. And so I acknowledge, it's called the acknowledgement sandwich. We're going to acknowledge first, then I'm going to use my I feel statement with the core emotion in there. So I feel sad. I feel sad because the story I'm making up is you think I'm not doing enough. And you think you're doing everything, I'm making this up, but you think I'm not doing enough. And so I'm in a lot of guilt and shame right now. And what do you need me to do differently? What are you needing from me? And then I might say, what I need from you is if we could sit down and go over the calendar and then divvy up who's doing what meals we're going to make, who's going to be doing the e-learning, what's your schedule for your calendar? Like what meeting times do you have? What meeting times do I have? And so we're sitting down proactively and coming up with that schedule. And this is where unexpected things come up, unexpected meetings come up, and we have to communicate. Hey, I know we originally said that was going to be, I was going to take over and do the e-learning. And unfortunately, I have this meeting that my boss called. How do you feel about that? That I now have this meeting. What do we need to do? So we got to talk through those things as opposed to all of a sudden the person disappears and they're on a call and you're like, wait, you're supposed to be watching the kids. So we've got to communicate proactively. We have to acknowledge that we're doing the best we can. So that acknowledgement sandwich, using the acknowledgement of what you notice specifically, using the I feel statement, and then asking what they need and telling what you need. That's kind of some structure to help couples right now.
What about some, we're isolated right now. We're stuck in our homes. So it's not like, Julie Jensen and I can go take a date night and go to Friday, go to, Grindstones for dinner to reconnect. Any advice for in the house, to take a few minutes to reconnect with one another? Any good tips in that regard in this isolated state?
Yeah, I've been helping couples do check-ins. So a check-in might look like, what is your energy tank right now? Like, is your energy at a 20%? Like, I'm functioning at a 20. I've got like hardly any energy left. What is your tank at? And they might like, I'm at 60. I'm like, okay, good. I'm needing to like do some self-care right now. And is there any way you can kind of fill in for me? So doing this kind of check in on what percentage is your energy tank at right now, and saying, what are you needing? I really like that question. I like that question for kids when they get old enough to recognize that. I like that for couples. I like that for friends. I like that for colleagues. I like the question, what do you need? Now, the person has to then look within and figure out what they need. And and the other person might not be able to meet that need. So we have to be realistic about that expectation. So I might say, I really need to take a time out. I need to go do some breathing. I'm overwhelmed. And then I like notes. I feel like right now, little notes. So I love you, and I know you're a big note. You do a lot of notes. Doing a note for your partner, saying, I just wanted you to know I love you. Hugs are extremely important. I call them bookends. So at the beginning of the day, you're gonna hug. I know this sounds uncomfortable for some people. And at the end of the day, we're gonna hug. And we know developmentally, children need a ton of appropriate hugs. So this is appropriate hugs. This isn't, I'm forcing my hug because I need the hug and I'm trying to get an unmet need. This is because it's really healthy for children to have appropriate touch. So hugging for couples is really important. And then just saying, how are you? How are you doing? And I could do that in passing. We could do that anytime, any place. And making eye contact is huge. You'd be surprised at how many people don't really look at each other. They're on their phone. And we do this to our kids too, like, hold on 1 minute. Yeah, yeah. And we're not really connected. So eye contact, softening your body language, and really attunement to your partner and your children are huge. And we can do that through self-care. So if I'm taking care of myself, I'm doing my breathing, I'm taking small breaks where I can, and I'm doing my writing, I'm maybe doing some walks with the dog. I'm more apt to be able to attune and listen better. We want to listen to understand, and we want to lead with empathy, and we want to have a lot of grace and compassion right now for ourselves and for each other.
So one area I'll be vulnerable here that we are struggling with a little bit at the Jensen household is I am considered an essential employee. So I'm gone during the day. And I think that sometimes drives some animosity between, some guilt on my side that Julie's at home doing e-learning and dealing with that side, but also on Julie's side, I think there's some animosity towards, how his life gets to go on and continue. I'm sure a lot of families are feeling that right now because there are a lot of essential workers. I think about our first responders, our police and firefighters. They're kind of their marriages are already kind of wired to have that give and take of just the daily schedule. But can you maybe give some advice for those that are feeling guilty about going to work during the day and how they're relating with their spouse on that guilt and animosity spectrum, if you will?
Yeah, because this is real life. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all struggling with shame and guilt right now. And so you going, oh man, I'm here and she's there and she's dealing with what feels like a lot at home with e-learning. The first thing is acknowledgement. Going, I get it. You've had a hard day. You have had the e-learning and it's overwhelming. What do you need from me? What would be helpful? I need to go for a walk. I need to get out of here. I need to go for driving the car. I need you to take the kid, do the nighttime routine and put him to bed and do the baths and whatever. And then you're like, I can do that. Now, it's hard on you too, because you've been working all day and then you're like depleted for energy. So it's going to be important too that you're doing a lot of self-care during the day, and same with her, a lot of breathing. This is definitely an issue right now where one person feels like they're doing more. This is a theme I'm seeing, and the other person, and it's not right or wrong or good or bad. And we need to acknowledge the part that people are doing. We all want to be seen. We all want to be understood. We all want to be loved, and we all want to feel like we're important. And if we can do that work in our home and create that environment with acknowledgement, if I could put that on a billboard, I would. That is huge. And then asking what the other person's need, and then say, hey, why don't you go for a run, or you go for a walk, or you go do your thing. I got the kids. That's really helpful for the person that's at home. And I think also the person that's gone at work doing a check-in, what do you need? And being able to articulate that.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. Like I said, sorry, that was a selfish perspective, but that's something that our family's dealing with, and I know a lot of families are probably dealing with that as well. So as we're closing our time here today a little bit, and I want to ask you some questions on some resources, but if anyone else has any more questions, now's a great time to share that. I know a lot of people are sharing their feelings. Jeanette and others are sharing their feelings and how they're feeling right now, which means a lot. Thank you for being open, Noblesville, for sharing your thoughts with us. If this is a great outlet for you, we want it to be an outlet for you. We're ready to hear from you and listen to your needs and wants. This is a great place to, if you have some thoughts you want to write down, feel free to share it now. So with that though, Kristen, if folks are feeling hopeless right now, if they're in a bad relationship, if they are struggling with their kids, where can they turn for help in this moment to get them through the next hour, really?
Yeah. The first thing is take your deep breaths. If you're in a crisis situation, of course, call 911. That's huge. If you are in a domestic violence situation, I recommend you call Prevail here in Noblesville. They're wonderful. They will walk you through steps. They will usher you through the process. They will help you create safety. And their phone number is 317-776-3472. I also recommend the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 1-800-799-7233. I think it's important that we are talking about mental health. We are asking, how are you feeling? We name the feeling. Again, I love the movie Inside Out. We know how critical, based on neuroscience and research, to name the feeling and acknowledge the feeling is significant in terms of mental health. And we don't talk about that enough because we're conditioned out of our feelings. I'll give you something to cry about, or shake it off, or you're fine, because we want our kids to be strong. That's not what creates strength. What creates strength, because we're going to have to deal with hard, and this is an example of that. There's always a positive, and then there's always a hard part in life. And this is sometimes one of the hard parts in life, and we're all going to have hard. If I can teach people and I can help kids deal with hard, we do that by teaching them how to connect to feelings. We teach them how to self-regulate through the breath. We teach them it's okay to have your feelings, because what that does is create resiliency. If you've ever seen a kid and they're like, ah, then you're like, oh, I get it, it's hard, da, 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 and then they're off and doing the next thing. They've moved on because they released it. What we know is if we don't name it, we don't acknowledge it, we don't process it, it stays stuck in the nervous system. And we don't want that. So it's important to talk about feelings to reduce the risk of addiction and suicide. So if someone is having any suicidal thoughts, feelings, please call the National Suicide Hotline. It's 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-TALK. They are fantastic. They understand the feeling of hopelessness. They understand the feeling of loneliness. They understand the feelings of wanting things to just, it would be better. It won't be better. They will help walk you through how to deal with the pain, how to deal with the fear, how to deal with the loneliness. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. There's tons of wonderful licensed therapists in the area that are all doing teletherapy, either video therapy or phone therapy, and they're trained to work through PTSD. They're trained to work through trauma. You want someone specifically trained in that to help walk you through the process. We don't want people to walk through this alone. So it's important you have a support network. So don't be afraid to reach out to one of those resources. If you don't want to call anybody you know, the 1-800-273-TALK is a wonderful resource. Keep it in your phone in case someone else is struggling. That's a great resource.
That's awesome. And I know you mentioned the past Community North too also has good inpatient if that's required as well right now. But I think the big message today that we want to convey is that you're not alone. We're all in this together. Everyone is struggling through this together. So let's all lean on one another. Let's check in on one another. Kristen and I are going to be back next Monday to do the same thing and chat about some new topics as well. So we hope that you will join us. It's a beautiful day in our city. It was a beautiful weekend. I saw people outside keeping their social distance, but still enjoying our wonderful parks and our trails and our neighborhoods. And there is hope. I can tell you, I took my dog this morning to the groomer because now dog groomers are open. So I just share that with you because they're starting to allow certain businesses responsibly to open. So we are turning a corner here as we head into the month of May shortly. What will be a very different month of May in the state of Indiana, but yet still a great month. So Kristen, thank you again for taking time. You have been so generous with your time. That just means so much. I hope you know how much we appreciate you and all of those on the front lines of not only our hospitals, but also our mental health professionals as well. You mean so much. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you back next Monday for another edition of Mental Health Mondays. But stay safe, Noblesville.
Thank you.